With somebody that has such a long-term and long-standing history of doing nautical archaeology, can you give us a little bit of background how it got started and what your perspective on nautical archaeology was when you were first getting started on your career?
Well, nautical archaeology, like regular archaeology, began with explorers who were seeking not only the past, but in some cases treasure, or just a chance to see what was down there. In the 19th century, when diving was first invented, these guys ultimately, of course, would recover whatever they could from these wrecks. By 1900, sponge divers in the Mediterranean were finding ancient wrecks with statues. That type of find inspired a new generation when scuba was invented, but it wasn't until 1960 that the first archaeologist actually put on a tank, went to the bottom, and systematically excavated a shipwreck. And that guy was George Bass, who would go on to found the Institute of Nautical Archaeology, and his dig at Cape Galedonia on a 2,900-year-old shipwreck had a number of people initially saying, well, really, can you do archaeology underwater? Well, he proved not only that you could, but that you could do it to the same standard as on land, and that maritime underwater archaeology not only would be a force in years to come, but it would add the otherwise inaccessible 70% of the planet that's covered by water to the catalog of available sites that people could study and learn from. For the first few decades, there were few finds. People were fascinated. The idea that all archaeology would just be driven by plunder or things to put on a shelf gave way to a more scientific study. But scientific underwater archaeology that adds to the history books really didn't get going until Bass did his work, and what has happened since then has been an exponential growth. And it progressed to the stage now there's practically no place on the planet, no ocean, no sea, that doesn't have some form of archaeology going on beneath the water.
I guess one of the real interesting questions, and I'm sure you can sort of cast a certain light on this, is when the early days of underwater archaeology were just getting going, what kind of methodologies did they do? How did they get this started? Obviously, there's this huge question of how long can you excavate? How can you set up early mapping grids underwater? How do you develop protocols for doing that sort of thing? It seems such an onerous challenge. It's hard enough to do this above ground.
Well, bear in mind, initially, a lot of this work is in the very shallow end of the pool. People are working in depths of less than 100 feet. In some cases, Galedonia, you're getting below 100 feet. What has changed over the last 2 decades, and particularly in the last decade, has been a lot of this work is now done electronically in terms of mapping and documenting before excavating. But from that and from just the innovation that saw not only archaeologists, but engineers and other talented folks stepping into the field, it moved forward. I think a key point to remember, and that is that underwater archaeology, nautical archaeology, is more than just the archaeologists. There's a whole field of people that have worked through the years to make this happen, cooperating and working with other scientists like oceanographers, geologists, geographers, marine biologists, and powerfully, there's a lot more that we're doing now based on the new technology that is having us look but not touch, and we're learning a great deal just by doing that, not having to excavate in all cases. We might not ever be able physically to walk on the decks of Titanic again, but wherever possible, even interacting with it through the windows of a submersible, you're still there. And I think it's that which adds to the aura of exploration and discovery, which helps inspire not only inquiry, but the next generation.